The war had lasted 17 years, and the Galactic Concord was dying. High Admiral stood at the great window of Axiom Station, watching the distant stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the peaceful lights, the Dominion was eating its way through another world. He could almost hear the screams of billions, even though sound did not travel through space. There were insects, not the small, harmless kind that crawled on garden planets. These were monsters the size of ground vehicles, with armor like starship hulls and claws that could tear through metal. They did not want peace. They did not want territory. They wanted to feed. Their queens demanded endless expansion, and their warriors obeyed without question. 32 star systems had fallen. The proud species of tall, silver-skinned people had watched their burn. The fleet, once the greatest naval force in the galaxy, was now a shadow of its former glory. The small and clever beings who had built the first faster-than-light engines were loading their children onto evacuation ships. Turned away from the window. Behind him, the council chamber was filled with the representatives of 100 species. They were arguing as they always did, but there was something different in their voices now. It was not anger or pride. It was fear. "We cannot hold the Meridian line," said Admiral of the. Her voice was tired. "They have broken through at 3 points. My ships are running out of ammunition. My crews are running out of hope." "Then we must negotiate," said of the Traders' Guild. He was a small, nervous creature with too many eyes. "Perhaps if we offer them territory, they will stop." "They do not stop," said Ambassador In of the. He was old, even by the long-lived standards of his people. "I have studied them for 60 years. They are driven by biology, not politics. They will consume until there is nothing left to consume." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew he was right. They had tried negotiation. They had tried offering worlds. They had taken the offerings and kept advancing. Walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye turned to him. He was the highest-ranking military officer in the Concord, and he had fought the longer than anyone else still alive. "There is one option we have not considered," he said. The silence deepened. "The humans." The reaction was immediate. Voices rose in protest. Bodies shifted uncomfortably, made a sound like a small animal being stepped on. "You cannot be serious," said the Admiral. "They are savages. They were quarantined for good reason." "I know the reasons," replied. "I was there when the decision was made." 80 years ago, a Concord exploration vessel had discovered a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The planet was classified as a death world. Its surface was covered with predators, parasites, and poisons. Its climate shifted violently between extremes. Its very air was corrosive. And somehow, impossibly, intelligent life had evolved there. The humans were young. They had not yet developed faster-than-light travel. They were still burning fossil fuels and fighting wars among themselves. The Concord had observed them for 3 years before making a decision. They were too dangerous. Not because of their technology, which was primitive, not because of their numbers, which were small, but because of something in their nature that the conquered species could not understand. Humans did not know when to stop. They had split the atom and immediately used it to destroy 2 of their own cities. They had developed chemical weapons and used them on their own people. They fought wars not for resources or territory, but for ideas, for beliefs, for things that existed only in their minds. The Conquered had seen many species. Some were peaceful, some were aggressive, but none were like the humans. None had that strange fire in their eyes, that willingness to burn everything, including themselves, to achieve their goals. So the humans were quarantined. A network of sensors was placed around their system. Ships were forbidden from approaching. The humans were left alone to develop in isolation, where they could not harm anyone but themselves. But rumors had spread over the decades. Traders who had intercepted human broadcasts spoke of them in whispers. They talked about human history, about the endless wars and the impossible recoveries. They talked about human soldiers who fought until death and then kept fighting. They talked about a species that had turned their death world into a garden through sheer stubborn refusal to die. Some called them monsters, others called them something worse. They called them survivors. The humans are unpredictable, said. We do not know what they will do if we contact them. We know what they will do, replied. They will kill us all slowly, painfully, until nothing remains. Ambassador rose from his seat. He was one of the few people in the room who had actually studied the humans in detail. He had spent decades analyzing their broadcasts, their art, their history. He understood them better than anyone in the Concord. The High Admiral is right, he said. The humans are dangerous, but they are also something else. They are adaptable, creative. They solve problems in ways we cannot predict because they do not think like us. He paused. And they hate bullies. What do you mean? Asked the Admiral. In human history, there is a pattern. When a powerful force threatens the weak, humans respond. Not always quickly, not always wisely, but eventually they respond. And when they do not stop until the threat is destroyed. The chamber was quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. You believe they will help us? Asked. I believe they will want to, said. They are exactly the kind of enemy that humans hate most, a mindless, consuming force that destroys everything in its path. He took a deep breath. But I also believe we should be careful what we ask for, because once the humans enter this war, we may not be able to control what happens next. The debate lasted 6 days. Representatives argued and pleaded and threatened. Old fears battled present desperation. In the end, it was the ambassador who broke the deadlock. She stood before the council, her silver skin pale with exhaustion. My people are gone, she said. Our world is ash. Our children are refugees. Her voice cracked. We feared the humans. We quarantined them because we were afraid of what they might become. But I am more afraid of what we will become if we do not ask for help. I am afraid we will become nothing at all. The vote passed. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. Ambassador was chosen for the mission. He would travel to the edge of human space. He would cross the quarantine line, and he would ask the most dangerous species in the galaxy for help. As he boarded his ship, he wondered if he was saving the Concord or dooming it. He supposed he would find out soon enough. Ambassador had expected to wait at the border for weeks. He had prepared supplies, recorded messages for his family, and made peace with the possibility that the humans might simply destroy his ship without warning. He had not expected them to be waiting for him. The human vessel appeared on his sensors the moment he crossed the quarantine line. It was ugly by Concord standards, a blocky thing covered in antennae and weapon ports, but it moved with a speed that made his heart beat faster. His ship was one of the fastest in the Concord fleet, and the human vessel matched his course effortlessly. A communication signal came through. The voice spoke perfect galactic standard. Vessel, you have entered restricted space. Please state your intentions. Took a breath. I am Ambassador of the Galactic Concord. I come with a message for your leaders. We wish to discuss cooperation. There was a pause, then the voice returned. Follow us, Ambassador. You are expected. Expected. The word echoed in his mind as he followed the human ship deeper into their territory. The Concord had built the quarantine line to keep the humans contained. They had believed the humans were primitive, isolated, unaware of the galaxy around them. They had been wrong. The journey to Earth took 3 days, and spent most of it staring out his window at the human settlements they passed, orbital stations, mining colonies, shipyards building vessels by the hundreds. The humans had not just developed faster-than-light travel. They had built an empire in secret, right under the Concord's nose. Earth itself was beautiful, blue and green and white, swirling with clouds. It had seen the old surveillance images, the ones that showed a planet choking on pollution and by war. That planet was gone. In its place was something healthier, something that had been healed with the same stubborn determination that defined everything human. He landed in a city called Geneva, on the shore of a great lake surrounded by mountains. The air was cold and clean. Humans walked the streets in their strange, upright way, bundled in warm clothing. They stared at him as he passed, but none seemed afraid. He was taken to a large building made of glass and stone. Inside, hundreds of humans sat in rows, watching him enter. This was the United Earth Coalition, the governing body of the human species. They had stopped arguing when he arrived, which he took as a good sign. A woman stood at the center of the chamber. She was tall for a human, with dark skin and gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her name was, and she was the Secretary General of the United Earth Coalition. "Ambassador In," she said. Her voice was calm and warm. "We have been expecting you for some time. Please tell us why you have come." In stepped forward. He had prepared this speech for weeks, had practiced it in front of mirrors and recorders. But now, standing before these strange, dangerous beings, the words felt small. He told them everything. He told them about the Dominion and their endless hunger. He told them about the 32 fallen systems, the billions dead, the refugees fleeing from world to world only to be consumed again. He told them about the conquered's defeats, their dwindling fleets, their growing despair. He showed them images, burning cities, mass graves, children crying for parents who would never return. He held nothing back because there was nothing left to hide. When he finished, the chamber was silent. The humans stared at him with expressions he could not read. Some looked angry, others looked sad. A few were crying, which surprised him. He had not known humans could cry for strangers. Then the questions began. They did not ask about payment or territory or political favors. They asked about what did they eat? How did they communicate? What were their weaknesses? They asked about conquered tactics, supply lines, command structures. They asked questions that revealed they had been watching the war for years, analyzing every battle, looking for patterns. One human, an old man with medals on his chest, asked the question that cut deepest. "Why should we help you?" In hesitated. "Because they will eventually reach your space. They will not stop at the quarantine line. They will come for you just as they came for us." The old man nodded slowly. "We know, we have been preparing for that possibility for decades." He leaned forward. "But that is not what I asked. The conquered quarantined us. You decided we were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too savage to join your little club. You watched us from behind your sensor net like we were animals in a cage. And now you come to us, hat in hand, asking for help." The chamber was very quiet. "Why should we help you when you never would have helped us?" It had no answer. The old man was right. The conquered had watched humanity struggle with disease, poverty, and war. They had never offered assistance. They had simply waited to see if the humans would destroy themselves. Secretary General raised her hand for silence. "General raises a fair point," she said. "But we are not here to discuss the past. We are here to discuss the future." She looked at In. "Ambassador, the people of Earth have debated this question for years. We knew this day would come. We knew the conquered would eventually need our help. And we have decided that we will answer." In felt hope rise in his chest for the first time in years. "But we have conditions." The hope flickered, stood and walked toward him. "When humanity enters this war, we enter it our way. We do not answer to your admirals. We do not follow your rules of engagement. Your people fight with honor, with restraint, with concern for collateral damage. We appreciate these values, but they are why you are losing." She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the lines on her face, the weight of decades in her eyes. "War is not a game to us, Ambassador. It is not a contest or a negotiation. When we fight to win, completely, permanently. We will do things that shock you. We will use tactics that horrify you. And when they finally beg for peace, we will decide the terms. Not you, not your council, us. In Swallowed, these are extraordinary demands. These are extraordinary times. He thought about the burning worlds. He thought about the refugee fleets. He thought about his own children, waiting on a station that could be the next target. If I refuse, his expression did not change. Then you will return to your council and tell them that humanity wished you well, and in a few years, when they reach our borders, we will fight them alone. We will probably win, and we will remember that the conquered, in its hour of need, could not accept our help. It was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. In thought about his instructions, the council had given him limits, boundaries, lines he was not supposed to cross. But the council was not here. The council had not seen what he had seen. The council did not understand what he now understood. The humans were not savages. They were not monsters. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors, and they had learned over thousands of years of bloody history exactly what it took to survive. I accept your terms, he said. Smiled, it was a small smile, tired and knowing. Then welcome to the war, Ambassador. We have a lot of work to do. In nodded, he had come to Earth hopping to save the conquered. Now he wondered if he had just changed it forever. The conquered expected a fleet. They expected 100 ships, perhaps 200, crewed by eager but inexperienced warriors. They expected to spend months training the humans in proper naval tactics, teaching them how civilized species fought their wars. What arrived 3 months later was something else entirely. High Admiral stood on the observation deck of Axiom Station, watching the human vessels emerge from faster-than-light travel. One after another, they appeared like stars being born. His aide was counting them out loud, but had stopped listening after the number passed 300. 400 warships, 400. The Conquered's entire remaining fleet was barely half that size. Had seen many ships in his long career, elegant cruisers, swift interceptors, massive carriers with their graceful curves. He knew what warships were supposed to look like. The human ships looked like nothing he had ever seen. They were ugly. There was no other word for it. They were blocky and angular, covered in weapons and armor plating that seemed almost excessive. They had no curves, no elegance, no beauty. They looked like they had been designed by engineers who cared only about one thing: survival. As he watched, one of the larger vessels turned toward the station. Its hull was marked with scars, burns, and patches. It had clearly seen battle before, even though the humans had supposedly been isolated for 80 years. They have been fighting something, his aide whispered. But what? Did not answer. He was beginning to understand something important about humans. They were always fighting. Even when they had no external enemies, they fought each other. They trained and prepared and built because to them, war was not an event. It was a constant state of being. The first human shuttles docked with the station an hour later, went to meet them personally, along with the other conquered admirals. They wanted to see these legendary warriors up close. The humans were smaller than expected. Most conquered species towered over them. But there was something in the way they moved, the way they held themselves, that made their size irrelevant. They walked like predators, aware of everything around them, ready for anything. Their commander was a man named General. He was older than most of the humans, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wore a simple uniform with no decorations, no medals, no signs of rank except for the small stars on his collar. He shook his hand in the human fashion, a grip that was surprisingly strong. High Admiral said, "Thank you for the welcome. I look forward to working together." Nodded. "We are grateful for your assistance, General. The Council has prepared a training schedule for your forces. We believe that with 6 months of preparation, your ships will be ready too." 6 months? His expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. High Admiral, with respect, we did not come here to train. We came here to fight. The conquered admirals exchanged glances. Admiral of the stepped forward. General, your enthusiasm is appreciated, but war is not simply a matter of courage. Our enemy is experienced, numerous, and without mercy. Your people need to learn our tactics, our communications protocols, We know your tactics, interrupted. We have been studying them for decades. We know why they fail. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. A holographic display appeared, showing a map of the war zone. Your defensive lines here, and here are based on protecting civilian populations. Noble but ineffective against an enemy that does not value civilian lives. The attack wherever you are weakest, because you try to defend everywhere. The admiral stared at the display, was pointing out flaws that had been debated in classified strategy sessions. Information that should have been impossible for an outsider to know. You have been watching us, said slowly. We have been watching everything. Put the device away. The conquered believed the quarantine line kept us contained, but electromagnetic signals do not stop at borders. We intercepted your communications, analyzed your battles, and learned from your mistakes. He looked at each admiral in turn. You fight wars like they are duels. Honor, rules, restraint. They do not follow these rules, so they win. We will not make that error. Admiral A's silver face had gone pale. What are you proposing, General? I am proposing that we win. His voice was flat, without emotion. They believe they are predators. They have never met a species that hunts them. We intend to change that. The first joint briefing was held the next day. Human and conquered officers filled a massive conference room, species that had never met sitting side by side. The tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. Stood at the front, surrounded by his staff. Behind him, screens displayed information that made the conquered officers uncomfortable. The communicate through pheromones began. Chemical signals that allow their hive mind to coordinate across vast distances. We have developed agents that disrupt this communication. Spray it on a warrior, and it becomes deaf and blind to its hive. Murmurs spread through the room. Chemical warfare was considered barbaric by conquered standards. Continued without pause. Their queens are the center of their command structure. Kill a queen, and thousands of warriors lose their purpose. We have trained special forces units specifically for queen assassination. More murmurs. Assassination was not a word the conquered used in polite company. And most importantly, said, we have brought ground forces. 2 million soldiers, trained and equipped to fight on planetary surfaces. The room went quiet. The conquered had abandoned ground warfare centuries ago. It was too costly, too primitive, too messy. Modern wars were fought in space, with clean weapons and minimal casualties. You intend to fight them on the ground? Admiral asked. That is suicide. A single warrior can kill a dozen soldiers. Then we will bring 24. His voice did not waver. The believed planets belong to them once they land. We are going to teach them otherwise. High Admiral stood up. The room fell silent. General, he said carefully, the methods you describe, they are not how we fight wars. They are not how civilized species conduct themselves. Met his gaze without flinching. High Admiral, they have killed billions of your people. They have eaten children in front of their parents. They have turned thriving worlds into breeding pits. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. You can fight them with honor, or you can fight them to win. You cannot do both. He turned back to the screens. We are not here to judge you. We are not here to change your culture. We are here because you asked for help and we answered. But you need to understand something about humans. He paused. We do not fight to look good. We do not fight to feel noble. We fight to make sure our enemies never threaten us again. He looked at the assembled officers, human and alien alike. They have never known fear. They are about to learn. Sat back down slowly. Around him, the conquered admirals were silent, processing what they had heard. He thought about the elegant cruisers, the swift interceptors, the graceful carriers. He thought about all the battles they had lost, all the worlds they had failed to save. Then he thought about the ugly human ships, bristling with weapons, the soldiers who trained for decades to fight monsters, the general who spoke of victory like it was the only option that mattered. Perhaps, he thought, ugliness was not such a bad thing after all. The Battle of IV was supposed to be a victory. Their scouts had reported a weakly defended industrial world, home to 8 billion civilians and minimal military presence. 3 hive fleets changed course to converge on the planet, their queens eager for the feast to come. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. For months, the conquered had broadcast false intelligence, fake communications between admirals complaining about resource shortages, ship movements suggesting the fleet was elsewhere, carefully constructed lies designed by human specialists who had spent their careers studying deception. They believed what they heard because they had never encountered an enemy that lied on this scale. The conquered species valued honesty. Their communications were straightforward, their tactics predictable. The concept of strategic deception was foreign to them. It was not foreign to humans. When the 3 hive fleets arrived at IV, they found the human First Expeditionary Fleet waiting for them. 400 warships, arranged in a formation that they had never seen before. It was not defensive. It was not aggressive. It was something else entirely. It was a net. The space battle began at 3:47 station time. They advanced in their usual swarm pattern, overwhelming numbers designed to crush any resistance through sheer weight. They had used this tactic 100 times before. It had always worked. Not today. The human ships did not try to hold a line. They did not try to protect each other. Instead, they scattered, each vessel finding its own angle of attack, its own targets. They moved like wolves hunting caribou, striking from unexpected directions, disappearing before they could respond. Admiral A watched from the conquered flagship, positioned safely behind the human lines. She had been skeptical of human tactics. She was not skeptical anymore. A human destroyer, badly damaged by weapons, turned and accelerated directly toward an enemy battleship. A opened her mouth to order assistance, but before she could speak, the destroyer rammed the battleship at full speed. Both ships exploded in a fireball that consumed 3 smaller vessels. "What are they doing?" her aide whispered. I had no answer. In conquered doctrine, a damaged ship retreated for repairs. You did not sacrifice vessels like pieces on a game board. Ships were valuable. Crews were irreplaceable. But the humans kept doing it. Again and again, damaged vessels chose destruction over retreat. They vented their atmosphere to extinguish fires, crews fighting in vacuum suits. Captains ordered their own ships destroyed rather than allow capture. One cruiser, its weapons offline, used its engines as a weapon, burning through a formation like a torch through paper. They were not prepared for enemies, who did not care about their own survival. After 6 hours, the hive fleets broke and retreated. They had lost 200 ships. The humans had lost 80. By conquered standards, it was a massacre. But the battle was not over. It had barely begun. They had landed 12 million warriors on IV before the space battle ended. They expected to consume the population at their leisure, knowing the conquered would not risk ground combat. For centuries, civilized species had accepted that once they landed, a planet was lost. The humans had not accepted this. 2 million human soldiers were already on the surface, hidden in underground bunkers and fortified cities. They had been waiting for months, preparing the battlefield, turning every street into a killing zone. General watched the first wave from a command center buried beneath the capital city. Screens showed the alien warriors pouring out of their landing ships, millions of them, black and gleaming like an ocean of death. Beautiful, murmured. His officers looked at him strangely. They are committed now, he explained. They cannot retreat, they have to fight on our ground by our rules. He turned to his communications officer. Signal all units. Operation Reckoning begins now. The cities of IV had been transformed. Buildings that looked abandoned were filled with explosives. Streets that seemed empty were lined with hidden weapons. Underground tunnels connected every position, allowing soldiers to appear and disappear like ghosts. They advanced into the capital expecting terrified civilians. They found something very different. The first wave walked into a kill zone 3 kilometers wide. Automated weapons opened fire from every direction. Explosives buried beneath the streets detonated in sequence. Buildings collapsed on advancing columns. In the first hour, 500,000 died without killing a single human. But they were not easily discouraged. They kept coming, wave after wave, climbing over the bodies of their dead. Their warriors were fearless, driven by the commands of their queens. They did not retreat, did not hesitate, did not stop. Neither did the humans. The battle for the capital lasted 3 weeks. Human soldiers fought in conditions that would have broken any conquered species. They slept in shifts, ate when they could, treated their wounds, and kept fighting. When their weapons ran empty, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. General deployed weapons that the conquered had never seen. Gas that disrupted pheromone communication, leaving warriors deaf and blind to their hive mind. Sound cannons that broadcast the death screams of captured queens, causing entire units to collapse in confusion. Biological agents that infected warriors and spread through physical contact. The conquered observers were horrified. These tactics violated every principle of civilized warfare. They were cruel, brutal, and effective. On the 18th day, human special forces launched Operation Queen's End. 12 teams infiltrated positions, moving through tunnels and ruins to reach their targets. Their mission was simple: kill the queens. 8 teams failed. Their members died in ways that would haunt the survivors forever, but 4 teams succeeded. 4 queens died, and with them, command of 4 million warriors. The offensive collapsed. Without their queens, the warriors lost coordination. They attacked randomly, fought each other, wandered in confusion. Human forces swept through the chaos, eliminating pockets of resistance with methodical precision. On the 39th day, the last warrior on IV died. 9 million had landed. None survived. Human casualties were 400,000 dead, 600,000 wounded. The survivors called it a victory. The conquered called it something else. High Admiral reviewed the battle footage in his private quarters. He watched humans charge positions with weapons that were empty. He watched medics treating wounded soldiers who immediately returned to the fighting. He watched a young human, barely more than a child, pick up a fallen comrade's rifle and keep firing even as claws tore at her armor. He had commanded fleets for 50 years. He had seen courage and cowardice, victory and defeat, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans did not fight like the conquered. They did not fight like They fought like something ancient, something primal. They fought like a species that had clawed its way up from the mud of a death world through sheer refusal to die. His door chimed. Admirala entered, her silver face troubled. "High Admiral," she said, "I have been reviewing the human tactics, the weapons they used, the methods they employed." She hesitated. "They are not what we expected." "No," agreed, "they are not. The chemical agents, the psychological warfare, the assassination teams." Sat down heavily. "We asked them for help, we did not ask them to become this." Was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what the humans call this battle?" he asked finally. Shook her head. "They call it the reckoning, not a victory, not a triumph, a reckoning." He turned off the display. "I am beginning to understand them, I think. They do not fight for glory or honor. They fight because they believe some things must be answered, some prices must be paid. He looked at his old friend. We invited them to this war, we accepted them as allies, and now we must live with what they are. He paused. I only hope when this is over that we can live with what we have become. I had no answer. Outside, the human fleet was already preparing for its next operation. The reckoning was just beginning. The war lasted another 3 years after IV. 3 years of fire and blood and things that no one wanted to remember. The humans did not merely fight, though, they hunted them. After the Battle of the Reckoning, they retreated to their core systems. They believed, as all species believed, that defense was easier than attack. They would fortify their worlds, rebuild their fleets, and wait for the storm to pass. They did not understand humans. General called it the Long March. Others called it the Purge. Whatever its name, it was unlike any military campaign in recorded history. The first expeditionary fleet did not stop at the Meridian Line. It pushed deeper into territory, liberating occupied worlds and pursuing enemy fleets that tried to escape. When they ran, the humans followed. When they hid, the humans found them. When they begged for time to negotiate, the humans answered with weapons fire. High Admiral traveled with the human fleet for the final year of the war. He wanted to understand what he was witnessing. He wanted to make sense of these strange, terrible, magnificent creatures who had come to save his people. He watched them liberate a world called III. The planet had been a breeding ground for 8 years, its original population reduced to livestock. When the human soldiers landed, they found survivors. Not many. Perhaps a few thousand, hiding in caves and ruins, eating whatever they could find. The humans did not just free them. They fed them, clothed them, built shelters and hospitals and schools, watched hardened soldiers, men and women who had killed without hesitation, sit with traumatized children and tell them stories until they fell asleep. I do not understand, he told General that night. You show such kindness to these people, but you show no mercy to the enemy. How can both things be true? Was quiet for a long moment. They were standing on a hillside overlooking the refugee camp, watching the lights flicker in the darkness. In human history, said finally, there was a leader named Churchill. During our greatest war, he was asked why his people kept fighting when victory seemed impossible. Do you know what he said? Shook his head. He said they fought because if they stopped, a great evil would consume everything they loved. He said some things were worth any price. Looked at the camp below. They are that evil, High Admiral. They are not misunderstood. They are not redeemable. They are a plague that consumes everything it touches. And the only way to stop a plague is to burn it out completely. But the kindness pressed, the compassion for survivors. Turn to face him. That is why we fight so hard, not for ourselves, not for glory. We fight because somewhere down there is a child who should have a future, a family that should have a home, a people who should have a chance to rebuild. His voice softened. We are not gentle with our enemies because we save our gentleness for those who deserve it. The siege of Prime began in the 3rd year. There was a nightmare of a planet, covered with hives the size of cities and warriors beyond counting. The conquered admirals advised against direct assault. The losses would be catastrophic, they said. Better to blockade the planet and wait for them to starve. The humans rejected this counsel. If we wait, Secretary General said in the final strategy meeting, they will rebuild, they will adapt, they will find another way to threaten us. This ends now or it never ends. The assault on Prime lasted 7 months. Human and conquered forces fought side by side, pushing through defenses that should have been impossible to breach. They lost ships by the dozen. They lost soldiers by the thousand. They paid a price that made even the hardened, conquered veterans weep. But they did not stop. On the 218th day, the last queen died. Her final transmission was a scream of rage and despair that echoed through every receiver in the system. Then there was silence. The peace treaty was signed on Axiom Station, broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Secretary General read the terms in a voice that carried no triumph, no satisfaction, only a weary finality. They would surrender 60% of their territory. They would submit to population controls. They would never again expand beyond their borders. Any violation would be met with total war. The conquered representatives signed first, their hands trembling with relief. 20 years of war were finally over. 20 years of loss and death and despair had ended. But the celebrations were quiet. The allied species looked at their human saviors and felt something complicated. Gratitude, certainly, but also something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like fear. Ambassador In requested a private meeting with Secretary General before the human fleet departed. They met in the same observation deck where had first watched the human ships arrive. "You saved us," In said. "I want you to know that, whatever else is true, whatever else happens, you saved us." Nodded slowly. She looked older than when they had first met, worn down by years of war, but her eyes were still sharp, still seeing. "I must ask you something," In continued. "Something I have wondered since the beginning. What does humanity want now? You came when we called, you fought when we asked, but what do you want from us?" Walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Human ships were forming up for the journey home, their ugly hulls gleaming in the station lights. "When I was young," she said, "I read a book by a human philosopher. He wrote that the measure of a species is not what it achieves in times of peace, but what it does in times of crisis. How it treats the weak, how it faces the powerful." She paused. "We want what we have always wanted, Ambassador, to survive, to build, to reach for something greater than ourselves." "And us?" In asked. "What do you want from the conquered?" Turned to face him. "You quarantined us because you feared what we were. You asked for our help because you feared what you would become without us. And now you fear us again. I can see it in your eyes, Ambassador, in the eyes of every conquered representative I have met." In could not deny it. He had spent years among humans now. He admired them, respected them, even cared for them. But he was also afraid of them, in a way he had never been afraid of anything before. "We do not ask you to love us," continued. "We do not ask you to trust us. We ask only that you remember this: when you called for help, we answered. When you had nowhere else to turn, we came. We are not the monsters you imagined. We are not the saints you hoped for. We are human. We are complicated. We are fierce. And we are here." She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. "The legend you feared, you accepted it. The quarantine you built was meant to protect you from us, but it did not protect you from it did not protect you from anything that truly threatened you." Her voice was gentle now, almost kind. "Perhaps it is time to accept that the galaxy is not safe. It has never been safe, and the only way to survive it is together." She left, and stood alone at the window, watching the human fleet begin its departure. One by one, the ships vanished into faster-than-light travel until only stars remained. He thought about everything he had witnessed: the battles, the kindness, the terror, and the hope. He thought about a species that had clawed its way up from a death world, that had split the atom and pointed it at themselves, that fought with a ferocity matched only by their compassion. He thought about legends. For 80 years, humanity had been a legend the conquered feared, a warning told to young officers, a nightmare whispered in dark corners. The savages beyond the quarantine line, the monsters waiting to be unleashed. Now they were a different kind of legend, the species that had come when called, the warriors who had paid any price for victory, the people who had burned to ash and then wept for the children they had saved. And did not know which legend was closer to the truth. Perhaps both were. Perhaps that was what made humans what they were. He turned away from the window at last. The conquered had survived. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity had taken its place among the stars. Not as supplicants, not as students, not as monsters or saviors, as exactly what they had always been. A legend accepted at last.